The Global Business Summit, presented by the Economic Times and Airtel, was host to a dynamic panel discussion on Digital India, New Rules for the New Economy, which highlighted how new technologies are the need of the hour to get India's 1.2 billion people online.
Let me start with access. Rajan, access. How do you see India achieving the goal of universal access? High-speed broadband access, not just any connectivity to the net.
Yeah, I think so. So today, I think it's important to keep in mind that India is already digitizing. The first thing is, let's not screw that up. Our view is we will probably need different types of technologies in addition to what we have. So for instance, Google has Loon, Facebook has their own set of technologies, Microsoft has a white space technology. What's not clear, it's not clear which of these will win, but what is very clear is we will need a different set of technologies that can get us to very different cost points, right? While delivering, let's say, 2 Mbps or 3 Mbps, let alone like 10 Mbps, to be able to go from 500 or 600 million users to 1 billion users. So I don't have the answer of exactly how we're going to get there, but what is very clear is the current set of technologies that we have won't get us to 1 billion users at the cost points that we need.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, you have been part of the government now with the industry. How feasible is this to sell this idea to the government that, yes, this entire opportunity awaits us to increase the productivity of the economy through connecting India across the country? Don't expect a commercial return immediately. Let us wait for the economic returns to roll out. How is this feasible? Is it feasible?
Yeah, I think it's not only feasible, but it is the only way in which you can reach scale. We've seen this whole thing playing out in front of our eyes in just 1 decade in the case of mobile. If you look at the mobile phone, because that's the first instance of technology actually getting to the hands of nearly 1 billion people. What are the lessons we've learned from that? The lesson we have learned from that is that people are taking to it not as a consumption item, especially those who are at the lower income strata. They are not treating this as a consumption item. It's an income item. It's a revenue augmentation item. People are using it to entertain themselves, no doubt, but essentially it's also about supplementing their income, whether that is by way of finding jobs or whether it is by, we've seen examples of well-documented cases of how taxi drivers have benefited from something like Uber. We ourselves are all familiar with cases of whether it is vegetable sellers or the retail shop next door or people looking for casual labor, electricians. Each one of them are using these devices to actually enhance their income, and those who are not are being left behind. So the question is that explosion of those kind of services and applications which actually help them to increase their income and in a sense attack the problem of economic inequalities through technology are critical because they will drive the adoption of technology, and that is the best weapon to overcome any issues about the costs. Because it's not just about applying technologies as we have imbibed them from the West, it's also about innovating further. So whether it is additional income or reducing the expenditure which I'm already incurring, all of these, the cost on the technology piece is a fraction. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that proportion. So the government's job is to enable the infrastructure, keep the highways of innovation clear and free of regulatory impediments, and then allow business a free hand to really put all these moving parts together. That's what made magic happen in mobile. That's what will make magic happen in the spread of internet.
Let me come to a slightly different aspect of this. You have often talk about women in technology. Yes. Now, there is a digital divide in society at large, but within that, there is a divide between men and women in terms of access to digital devices, their ability to access the wider internet. Instead of liberating and empowering women, you see technology actually working the other way around.
So I think there's a few things that are going on here. I think first of all, we definitely need to expand internet access. I think that's something everyone agrees on. But I think even more important than that, we can't just drop internet access with people and say, okay, here you go, better yourselves. People are resistant to change, first of all. Second of all, when you talk about women, they're running a household, they're doing all these household work, they're with their children, They don't have time. They see the internet or a phone as more work, another job that they have to do. They don't see that as an opportunity. So I think we also owe it to these communities to educate them on the opportunity that it's creating, because if we just leave internet or leave connectivity with people and we don't train them on what to do with it, what their own data, what they're trading for it, we're not really doing a service to women or these communities either.
Let me put a question to Akhil and to the verse to Rishad. Do you as a company ever look at the possibility of sourcing some equipment that you need from an Indian manufacturer, Indian supplier? Or do you opt for the convenience of having bulk purchase from known, reliable, tested international supplier? The obverse of that is, has a company like Wipro, which used to do hardware and also software, ever tried to get into the manufacture of telecom equipment, which is quite a demanding thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think we have only one criteria, that the equipment we use for the settled technologies, which are well settled, ecosystem is developed, that equipment must be of world standard. Now, whether it comes from an Indian manufacturer, a multinational who have got their plants in India like Ericsson's, Nokia, that's irrelevant. It has to be of the same standard and the same quality, but that cannot be compromised, especially because we do not have the luxury of rework every time. Therefore, the equipment has to be of international quality. Wherever it comes at the best possible prices with the best maintenance contracts, we will absolutely go for that.
So we've actually moved out of all hardware business, right? We're focusing on the software side, but we're very much willing to work with stakeholders, right? So we work very, very closely now with the startup ecosystem in India, because the belief is that innovation is happening in small companies, it's happening on the edge, and how can we leverage those capabilities and bake them inside the organization to ultimately take solutions to customers, right? So the focus is moved away from not invented here to how can you build a very, very strong ecosystem and work with companies that are doing fabulous work, as opposed to trying to replicate that inside the organization. So we have a fund now that we invest through, but we are building a huge network of partnerships, both in India and outside, and we will work with players that bring the best technology and the best capabilities to us and to our customers.
I will invite you to deliver your keynote. Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley when advanced research being done at Stanford University was commercialized. When a particular set of professors encouraged their students, graduate students, to set up small units within the vicinity of the university. And the US government, particularly its Defense Department, was willing to procure stuff from these small little companies, purely focusing on the standards they set for the equipment they wanted to procure, without looking at their past track record or their pedigree. Will the government today undertake such a venture? Will it encourage small units, technology-intensive fresh startups, to supply to the government without looking at their pedigree and without looking at L1? So, incorporating that, please deliver your keynote address.
What is the take of Indians on technology? And I have a unique habit of observing India as an activist. And my take is, Indians first observe a technology. Then they adopt the technology. Then they enjoy the technology. And lastly, they get empowered and enlightened. If this being the base of India, at times government and private operators have to respond to this kind of urge of Indians. And that is what Digital India is about. Its first base is creating of a digital infrastructure. You know, we are linking about 250,000 gram panchayats of India by optical fiber network. We have scaled it up more than 500 times. We'll do it further. What is the second thing I'm doing? Because infrastructure existing has to be re-strengthened first. We have got nearly 1 lakh common service centers, which in the common parlance means giving service in the rural and semi-rural area to those who don't have a computer. We have decided to scale it up. And every Gram Panchayat of India by 2016 will have this common service center. Do you know? Many of them are being run by ladies, and they are doing banking transaction of 1 crore 30 lakh per day. They are having an insurance transaction of 70 lakh per day, earning good commission. I'm scaling them up from e-ticketing to e-health to e-empowerment. Let me compliment all the mobile operators who have done a great job in the spread of mobile phone in the country. They've done a great job. I compliment them. What is my insistence? Please reinforce your network to give a good service too. That's all I'm saying. On my part, all the policy initiative I have done, spectrum trading, spectrum sharing, spectrum harmonization. One auction has taken place, other will also follow. It is an ongoing process. I will be most liberal in helping that. But I will be doing my duty. The operators have also to do their duty, including PSUs. And therefore, I'm happy to tell you today that BSNL, the PSU telephone company, which was in a big loss of 8,000 crores, has turned around as far as operating profit is concerned in the last 5 years for the first time, has turned into operating profit of 672 crores and has a big rise of revenue of 4.1%. I'm the Minister for Communication, for IT, for Postal and also Electronics. When I became the Minister, the total investment in electronic manufacturing was 11,600 to 700 crores. And I thought I will promote it in a very big way. It is employment generating and new technology. And today I'm happy to announce you that by December 2015, 1.14 lakh investment have come in electronic manufacturing in India. That is one development. And I'm very happy to tell you that all the major companies of the world, namely Panasonic, Mitsubishi, Nidec, Samsung, Bosch, Foxconn, Jabil Electronics, Continental, Philips, are in India beside all the top Indian companies who are already there or many are exploring. And I was very surprised to learn that mobile manufacturing has attracted nearly 50 new plants in the last 10 months. Earlier in 14, about 58 million were being manufactured. Now 100 million are being manufactured. And 20,000 new jobs have been created. You talked of geographical space. All the state governments are keenly pursuing for electronic cluster. When I became minister, only 2 have been approved. Now in principle, more than 30 have been approved and 5 have come into operations. 6. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very short snapshot of digital India which we are doing. Let me conclude. We have to walk together. I will do my walking. You all need to do your walking. That's how we'll make digital India a great success.
Welcome to the ET Global Business Summit, Professor Rubini. What do you think of the current global economic scenario and how is India faring, really?
Well, certainly the year has started with a significant amount of financial turmoil. There has been a sharp correction in global equities. It's driven by a number of concerns. One is the concern about China potentially having a hard landing of its growth and leading to a collapse of the stock market and the currency. My view is China is going to have a bumpy landing rather than a hard landing. Chinese growth is slowing down, but it's not a free fall. So probably markets have become too pessimistic about China, even if the slowdown of China has significant impacts on the global economy through trade and financial channels. There's also some concern about U.S. economic growth that is slowing down and whether the Fed made a policy mistake by starting to exiting zero policy rate in December. There is the turmoil in the Middle East that is political. There's concerns about what the fall in oil prices means. Should be good for those countries that are commodity and energy importers, but maybe now people think that the fall in oil prices is signaling not just the increase in global supply of oil, less coming from Iran, but also weakness in global demand, since economic growth in China, in emerging markets, in US is slowing down. So there are a number of things that people worry about.
But would you say India is in a sweet spot?
India is in a relatively stronger position for a number of reasons. It's a bit of a less open economy in terms of trade and financial links. compared to other economies in the world, even if there has been a significant increase in openness. Domestic demand is quite robust. There is a young population. There is drivers of growth that are domestic, like consumption and others, infrastructure spending and so on. But even in India, when there is global financial turmoil, there is an impact. First of all, the stock market has fallen by 20%. The currency, however, gradually has fallen lower. Of course, the fall in commodity prices is beneficial for a commodity importing country like India. There's been a slowdown of exports growth in India, even compared to the weakness in global exports, in part because the currency has appreciated in relative terms relative to emerging markets, while it's been weakened relative to US dollar. Global growth is not particularly strong. The Chinese are dumping a lot of their excess capacity in third markets, and therefore there is price competition. There's been also a slowdown of capital spending and investment in India. There is an important driver of economic growth. So India is doing well, given the global headwinds. They're doing economic and macro reform. Those things have to be continued.
Amongst the emerging nations, where would you rank India?
I would say it's one of the strongest. If you take, for example, the BRICS, today 2 of them are in a recession, Russia and Brazil. One of them is barely growing, South Africa. China is slowing down towards a growth rate of 6%, eventually 5%, while the only one whose growth rate has been accelerating is India. India is the fastest economic growth today among major emerging markets. So I would certainly rank India among one of the stronger emerging markets.
Right. And how's the capacity glut in China likely to impact India and the rest of the world for that matter?
Well, China has a deflationary impact on the global economy through two channels. One is that the demand for commodity is slowing down, and there has been a fall sharp in commodity prices. That's a negative for commodity exporting countries. That actually is a positive for a country like India, who is a net commodity importer. The cost of a lot of intermediate inputs is falling, and that's actually positive. However, now there is a glut of capacity in steel, in cement, in aluminum, glass plates, in many parts of manufacturing. What China is doing is not to shut down those factories. They're not really doing state-owned enterprise reform. They're taking all that glut of capacity and trying to export it, in some cases dump it in global market. So you've seen a surge, for example, of exports of steel of China towards the US, towards Europe, towards India. Now there has been trade protection action being taken by these countries. Same thing is happening in other sectors of industry and manufacturing. So there is another deflationary pressure. And of course, there has been a surge of exports of China and imports from China in India of a wide range of commodities as well.
Right. And you've heard the Prime Minister's reforms here at this summit, as well as at other occasions recently. How do you evaluate the current government, and do you think the pace of reforms needs to be much faster?
Well, the list of reforms to be made, first of all, is the right one. Wide range of reforms. Of course, implementing all of them is going to take time, and some of them already been made. So I think the direction of policy, both macroeconomic policies and structural reform, is going in the right direction. I would say that the pace could be accelerated. Part of it is to do with legislative constraints. Of course, the government doesn't have full control on the upper house, and therefore things like GST reform have been stuck there. But there are other things that could be accelerated. Certainly you need land reform, you need labor market reform. Some of those things are not happening at a central level, are occurring at a state level. A number of states have been doing land and labor reforms. I think that to attract more foreign direct investment, you have to make sure that the tax environment for foreign firms is clear and there is not ex post changes in taxation. That's an important reform. I think there is still a significant amount of non-performing loans and bad assets on the balance sheet of many banks. And you also to restructure the liabilities of those corporations that are highly indebted. That process of corporate and banking reform is key to have acceleration of credit growth and acceleration of investment, both private and public. That's an effort that has to be done. You have to pass a bankruptcy court in order to do that, because right now the system is one in which there are too many people are free riding on the system and so on. So a lot of work needs to be continued to be done, but it's going in the right direction.
All right. And if you had to do a SWOT analysis of India at this point in time, what would that look like?
Well, as I said, I'm quite positive about India in terms of the direction that policy are taken, both macroeconomic policies and structural policy. I think on the fiscal side, more adjustment has to occur while leaving room for capital spending as opposed to current spending. I think the number of subsidies have been phased out. More of them have to be phased out. I think that there has to be proper pricing of resources like water. and like power that in some cases are near zero in price, and of course the demand is excessive and there's a waste of them. So more efficient allocation of those power and water resources is key. So there's plenty of stuff needs to be done on the fiscal, also in reforming the corporate tax system to make it more efficient. And there's a long list, as we said, of structure reform that needs to be implemented.
Right. And biggest opportunity and biggest threat?
The biggest opportunity is that if these reforms do occur, actually, the potential growth of India is very strong. India has already comparative advantages in a variety of information technologies. That has been a sweet spot for the last 20 years in the case of India. India now can attract also significant amount of foreign direct investment in manufacturing as cost of labors are rising in China and other parts of emerging markets. If you have the right infrastructure, if you have the right labor environment, if you have the right land acquisition environment, I think significant amount of foreign direct investment is going to come to India, because India, first of all, is a large domestic market. You can produce for the domestic market, you produce for export. So there is definitely a lot of opportunity. There is work to be done, but a lot of opportunity. The risk is that maybe there is slippages in the reform effort, because these things are politically difficult. Right. If there is not enough political effort to make these reforms, then already we see in the business environment is becoming slightly less optimistic. Capital spending by the private sector has become weaker. Some people say that while the headline growth rate is 7%, bottom up it doesn't feel like that way. And there are these global headwinds that are actually hurting economic growth around the world and even in India. So the risk is there is policy slippage rather than being policy action, and then given global headwinds, growth start to weaken in a way that becomes negative for the opportunities that India have ahead of itself.
Right. And like you said, I mean, we are predicting a growth rate, a GDP growth rate of over 7% at the end of this financial year. But given the reforms, and if the pace of those reforms is maintained, what's the sort of growth that India can look at in the next couple of years?
Well, it depends on the extent of economic reform. I would say potential growth is certainly around 7% or above. I think to achieve 8% or more than 8, some people say 9 or so on, I think that the reform effort has to be much more aggressive than it has been so far. Of course, some of the slowdown of growth depends also on global headwinds. When the global economy is going to improve, that's going to be helping India as well, but India has to start helping itself before it can wait until the world turns around in a more favorable direction.
All right, that's well said, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
As a company, we are in logistics. We are one-stop shop for logistics. All Cargo is the only company in India which gives you across the board all the services which are needed in logistics. For Make in India to succeed, it is on the back of logistics, because Make in India is not only about manufacturing for India consumption, but consumption for the world. And for that, logistics is extremely important. For Make in India to succeed, logistics should be seamless, should be an enabler. So logistics should get in place. So for that, we need the right infrastructure, the right processes. The state and the center should talk to each other, have the right policies, and make it as one India rather than having different Indias. I'm referring to GST now. So those are some of the things which are extremely important for India to come into the next phase, and to be the leader and be consistent in being the fastest growing country. And for that, all the infrastructure steps which have been taken, we just need more speed. GBS, it's a great place. This is the first time I'm attending, of course, but I can see from the past, that was the last year, and even the current year, it is a great platform which I think ET is bringing out over here for all of us to gather, to learn, to also know what the policy makers, where are they going, what is the view from their side also. Apart from that, they hear from us, what do we need? So it's a great platform, great gathering, and I think I'm very delighted to be here.